Joining me in the trash compactor today is John,
Hello.
Mickey,
Hey.
and Murray.
Oh, hello.
And today we will be discussing episode 3 of the Book of Boba Fett, The Streets of Mos Espa. And let's start out with overall reactions. John, overall reactions to episode 3.
I enjoyed it as I enjoy every episode of the show. But I will say that in this episode, I've noticed a couple of things that I would criticize about maybe pacing or style choices. But that being said, it didn't deter me from the quality of the show. I didn't think it took a big left field into crap territory. But there are a couple of things about it that I could like nitpick about.
Mickey, your overall thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was going to say a lot of the same thing John was going to say. Maybe I'm a little bit more critical. I was a little bit more disappointed in it. Definitely like a roller coaster in terms of like where I felt like the first went, where the second got much better. And now the third, I'm kind of like back down on a little bit. I mean, it's not horrible, or anything like that, but I definitely think there's definitely pacing things and stuff like that. And I think overall to me, like just a challenge of like what it could be that it's just not quite achieving.
Murray, overall thoughts?
I'm in the same camp. I think I'm more in Mickey's camp where there were multiple I like the show and the episode was cool and it's not like I'm like down on the show, but there's definitely multiple times when I was watching this episode and something would happen, like they would roll up on like British like half droid, half human people, and I was just like, what the fuck am I watching right now? Like, what is this?
Yeah.
And then I had a feeling based off of the first episode. I told my wife, I was like, I feel like this is directed by Robert Rodriguez because it just seemed like I don't know, because I'm not gonna say he's bad or but it just was like, this doesn't feel like the second episode, which I don't think he directed that one, right?
He didn't.
Yeah, he did not.
Yeah,
when
it
I
just
saw
felt
it was
like
directed by
cheesy.
him, I was like, Josh Murray's going to notice
Yeah,
that.
it's like it felt like cosplay. Like I was just like, what is going on here? But overall, I did like it ish.
Yeah. Once again, I would say I'm in the same camp as all of you guys. I was kind of, again, like I enjoyed it and I enjoy the show overall. Not that I'm giving it a pass, but there's definitely Star Wars that I have problems with. And I think Mickey or Murray, one of you said it's just that it's not what it could be.
Yeah, Mickey said that.
Mickey, yep.
Yeah. Which I think is probably true, but that said, like, I don't know, I just don't have it in me to really have the knives out for this show. But yeah, there are some things that I think in this episode in particular could have been done a little bit better. And it is weird, right? Because Robert Rodriguez, I feel like the episodes he directs, I feel like the expectations for what they're going to be like are actually higher because he's known for directing action really well. But it seems like his episodes are kind of the ones that get kind of shit on the most. Maybe it's the fact that he's used to directing features and used to going at his own pace. Like he takes his time. I know that he has his own setup in Austin and he kind of does his own thing. And I think maybe the pace of directing a TV series is maybe something he's not used to. So they're kind of moving faster. And like, rather than, having a week to shoot a car chase, he has a day. And maybe that comes through. Murray, then John.
So my thing with Robert Rodriguez, and it's funny because me and John were talking and conversing the other day if Desperado still holds up, and it like, to me it's exactly the same, which probably means it doesn't hold up if it's the same now as it was like when it first came out. But Robert Rodriguez was always like, you could count on him for some really cool like shots. It almost seemed like that's all he cared about was like, what's cool and I'm gonna make it look awesome. But for his episodes, I feel like they're just kind of like flat and dull, and I'm not getting any like even cool shots or cool moments. And I don't want to like jump ahead too much, but if you watch Once Upon a Time in Mexico, and then you watch this episode, you're like, yes, this is 100% a guy that would rush to be like, we need Boba Fett riding a Rancor. Oh my god, we need it. And so, so when that conversation happened, I was like, oh, this guy is getting so blinded by like, I think it was Josh, you put up that meme of the kids playing with the action figures, and I was like, yeah, that's exactly what's happening in this episode.
No, it's funny because sure, with Robert Rodriguez, you get, oh my god, we have to see Boba Fett riding a Rancor, but then you also get Danny Trejo as a Rancor trainer, which I think is the fucking amazing shit. Yeah.
Yep.
I cheered when he showed up. I was like, fucking Danny Trejo.
Yeah. No, and he was really good. Like he fit he like, you totally imagined like he's totally a Rancor trainer.
Oh,
he's good. John, then Mickey.
There's something about Robert Rodriguez that I think is very old school with his action. And I feel like even when we're talking about Desperado, Murray, the movie Desperado, El Mariachi, whatever, I feel like they're cool because of the content that he is a mariachi with these guns who's going against these drug cartels. But the action itself is very kind of like cheesy and like, I don't want to say kind of like a matter of fact sort of thing, but it's just like, it's not like, oh, look at the choreography of Desperado.
Yeah. It's also very like, long-winded, yeah.
Yeah, it's just like, look at this dude who's wearing a cool outfit with a guitar who's taking on these fucking goons. Mm-hmm. So I feel like when it comes to the action in the Boba Fett show, he's like, hey, check out this fucking like biker mod squad who's chasing down this dude. The Vespa chase scene. Yeah, the Vespa chase scene, which is another point I want to get into. But it's just like, I don't think he's overly concerned about like how cool the movements are as much as he's like, look at this gang follow this guy. Like it's the content. And I think he's like content over the choreography.
Yeah. But like in Desperado, like he had like cool shots though too. Just even like the mariachi like on the bar with like the backlighting or the whole like Steve Buscemi thing. The whole movie. It just like looks cool where this just looks flat. Sorry, I know Mickey's
well maybe to Josh's point, maybe it's one of those constraints where it's like he was doing a feature. You know, he had he had Miramax behind his back and he had all the time. You know, I know he's like famous for shooting things cheap and fast, but like with a TV show, it's like cheaper and faster. So,
but the budget for this TV show is probably going to be bigger than any budget he's ever had. So I wonder if he needs the constraints to force like those cool shots and cool scenes. And
maybe like the Jaws thing, you know, the more things against you, the more creative you have to be. All right, Mickey, I feel like you're holding.
No worries. First of all, I have something to say to that, but like the first thing too was since we said Dan Trejo, also like I got more excited myself for Stephen Root, which was
awesome.
I love
Stephen
I know, and he was so good.
So I like him. Yeah, sorry, I was gonna say like I like him a lot, but it was the first thing. Because I'm just thinking of like that. I think John like categorized him as like almost like a New Jersey or Seinfeld character in the first one. The like, and so when like the first person you see is someone that you know inside and out so well, that was like one of my first triggers of being like, what am I watching? Is this like the first episode again? And then they meet like the hello governor, like we're the Vespa gang, and I was just like, what the fuck am I watching right now? Coming off of the last episode. Sorry,
I was just waiting for Stephen Root to go like, they got my water. Where's my water? They got my water.
Yeah.
My water.
And they put him back in the Rancor pit in his new office.
I think it's true. I definitely think the biker gang was probably that. It's really the accents for me. That's my main complaint. Is like the thing that threw me the most, and they much more than even Stephen Root or anything was like that kind of weird British accent. But I also wonder too if the Stephen Root thing's like maybe a little nod to like one of my favorite like Star Wars jokes from News Radio. Like there was that great episode of News Radio where they're like in the future and they just have like that great Star Wars jokes about like the news anchors talking about like the terrorist rebels who killed all the innocent people on the Death Star. I wonder if that was like a little nod to that or not. But I think to the point too, you're saying the flatness and everything. I was thinking about this. I assume they're using the same system in Boba Fett as they use in The Mandalorian, where it's that kind of big screen, wraparound screen thing where they film everything in front of.
What's that called, Josh? has
the
a
volume
name.
stage.
Yeah.
There you go.
And I feel like that's got to really limit like it looks good, especially for this desert. Maybe that's why everything's in the desert. I got to assume for that kind of like, high contrast brightness, it looks good, but I can't imagine it's great for dynamics, for shadows and things like that.
I think you have to know how to utilize it well.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I think having like a guy from the 90s making things on a shoestring using physical things to like, now you got him in front of this thing. Maybe that's kind of part of where this issue where it's like, if nothing looks bad, but again, there's like a dynamic to it that I think is possibly missing.
Yeah, I mean, he's used to shooting blue screen. Like he did Sin City and the Spy Kids things in like his own studio. Like he's like really into that whole like virtual quote unquote way of filmmaking. I just think there are, and it is interesting too because I've seen a bunch of behind the scenes photos. They didn't use the volume as much as you'd think on the Book of Boba Fett. They shot a lot of it outside with blue screen and physical sets for whatever reason. I'm not entirely sure why. It probably has something to do with the street set and the lighting, maybe. I'm not exactly sure. But John, I have a feeling we're about to get into the amazing Technicolor West Side Story biker gang.
Yes, we are.
Okay, go ahead.
So, to me, I feel like one of my critiques I have of this episode is that they make these choices that I feel like if they just gave it another draft in the script, or if they thought about it for longer, they might not have stuck with those choices. And I think one of them was the West Side Story mod Vespa biker gang. And the thing is like that idea is actually really cool, but it doesn't fit with Desert Tatooine Boba Fett like stuff. Like even Stephen Root, he's like, there is these like modified teenagers that are like going around and stealing shit, and then when you meet them, they're like, oh yeah, we don't have any work, so we have to like steal stuff. And it's like right off the bat, I'm like, well, how do you afford your cybernetics? Why are you all dressed like you're fucking... They all look like tens. Like they're all models. Yeah. And they all have these like super slick, sophisticated clothes. And they have these robotics, which don't seem to do anything.
And they don't look good either. It looks like he's just rubber cemented to his face.
Well, which might have some of its charm. And then the Vespas, like each one's like, you get the red Vespa, the blue Vespa, the green Vespa. And it's just like, I'm like, I feel like this gang should be like on Canto Bight with the casino people, robbing them. Yeah. Or like, I feel like they should be like on Coruscant, which is very Blade Runner, City Neon stuff. Like they're in like Drive, and the movie is like Once Upon a Time in the West. Mm-hmm. And so it's just like, I feel like the gang, if they just thought about it a little bit, if they just did a couple of redrafts of their sketches, they should have been much more of like the Vampire Gang and Near Dark. Really gritty, really visceral. And like when you see them, you're like, oh, fuck. Like these guys, don't fuck with them. Like what if they all had like more of a Terminator aesthetic, like Mad Max, than they do of the Mod Squad? And then like I think I would have bought them as like a tough gang that can go up against like cartels. So that's like no fault of the actors, or anything like that. It's just like, I just thought that was like a choice that was made in the sketch part of the episode where they're drawing like art. And I'm like, why? Like it stands out visually, like they stand out as unique, but it's like, but in a way that stands out, like they don't fit in the show, if that makes any sense.
No, that makes sense. It is interesting because it's definitely a choice. Yes. It's definitely a bold choice, and I don't think it was accidental. Again, I feel like this is Robert Rodriguez. It's like one notch too far into Spy Kids kind of territory. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So I don't think it's a question of like if they just thought about it a little more. I think it's Robert Rodriguez was like, this is what I want. I think this would be cool. And while I agree with you that I don't know that it's necessarily what I say would have chosen, it's a balancing act, right? Because I do like and do think that Star Wars is kind of elastic, right? Like it can handle a lot of different genres and visual styles as long as they're incorporated correctly. And I do appreciate the intention to try to do something maybe that you wouldn't necessarily expect to see in Star Wars. But once again, like, it's a balancing act. You have to be careful about how you go about it. I mean, yeah, like you were saying, like, there are a lot of things about it that feel just a little bit off, like whether it's the accents, Mickey, or the very Vespa reminiscent design, or also, John, when you were talking, I didn't even really think about it like that. But I mean, you're exactly right. Where did they get the money for all this stuff? Like, maybe, like, I like it conceptually.
Me too. But just in that world, it's weird.
Well, because like in the movie, John brought up Blade Runner, but even in the movie Looper, like when they like all the cars, it's almost like they modded them themselves to run off of solar power. Like you see almost like everything like duct taped to the cars and stuff like that. And that actually takes place in the future, but it feels like more real. Like if they had some sort of aesthetic like that, you might be like, well, no, this is what they scavenge and sell, and they like make these mods, right? Like, I don't know, it just seems so like clear cut, almost like they were like rich kids, like in an 80s like ski movie, and they were like the villains in it, and they had all their daddy's money.
Yeah.
Rather than like scavengers that or like people that have to grift and come up with this money, or like maybe their bikes aren't so crystal clean, and they're almost like made themselves. Like, I don't know how to explain it, but
like if they were really shoddy bikes, that would be really cool.
Yeah, like if it was like more Looper and less like, I don't know, Spy Kids, I guess would be the thing.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like they do have a rich uncle, and like they got like a Groupon for a whole set of like Vespa speeders. Mickey,
obviously we're talking about they're referencing real world things, and I'm just wondering. I guess I don't know enough about the mod scene from like '60s England to know the dynamics of it, but I wonder if there was like it was a bunch of unemployed kids in London, listening to new music and driving around and wearing fancy clothes, and they were unemployed and restless. But like, yeah, where did they get the money? I mean, I guess if it was like that in the real world, like. There is some real world answer to it, but again, I like the other. I just want to also bring too is like I think this was like a little Twitter thing for a day where a lot of people were kind of saying like like it's dumb, but then people were pointing out like but look at episode 1 using like the 50s aesthetics and everything, and I'm like, but my thought to that was like, yes, that's true, but also everyone loves episode 1. It worked out. So
great. So it's funny you reference the prequels because like what really reminded me of was the diner scene in episode 2.
Dexter.
That's what I meant. Yeah.
Which I do have to say, I think this stands out to me less than that.
I agree.
Or actually, maybe. I mean, it depends because like everything surrounding the diner scene in episode 2, kind of maybe it didn't really stick out that much because it's sort of the whole thing is just kind of aesthetically strange. Whereas I feel like this show swings from yes to like
I did get the same feeling as that scene where you're just watching. Don't get me wrong, we're watching like a space western with like lasers and like laser swords, but like you watch the Vespa scene or that diner scene and you're just like, this is just silly. This is just plain silly. Like it like kind of points out like, what am I watching? Like, what is this? Like where you could get lost in, even like, I'm not going to bash on the prequels too much, but you could get lost in the world created by the original trilogy or the sequels or Mandalorian. But then like this, it just seems like it like shows its hand too much. And you could almost see the man behind the curtain or the man behind the computer. And then when you bring in this aesthetic, which I have no idea what the mod aesthetic was, like Mickey was saying, like, I don't know if any of us do, but this looks like somebody was like, oh, I totally know. And then they got it off of like Wikipedia and like, it's all just like stereotypical. And like, this is what it was like back then. So let's add that here. Like, I don't know.
Mickey.
I was going to say like the silliness too, like we're talking about that. I think that's maybe something Star Wars has to wrestle with, or they're on this like edge, like a big thing too with that whole Twitter was people were saying like, oh, like, people are like, oh, this now it's a stupid little kids show. Like, why do we feel like, and then people are like, Star Wars is a kid's thing. And like,
it's always true.
But I think Star Wars is kind of, maybe it's an older kid thing, or it's just on that razor's edge where I feel like, and it made me think, I was actually like, thinking of the other famous sci-fi kids show that's a kids show is Doctor Who. Like Doctor Who is silly, and it can be silly, and no one ever faults it for being silly because that's what it is. Where Star Wars seems to have to wrestle with, it has this like thing where like the comics and some of the video games got dark, even though it's, some of the influences early on was silly, like it's this kind of like dynamic it's always got to like play with and fall on one side, and it's something that's always have to wrestle with.
Yeah, I think Star Wars fans in particular get really worked up when there's anything in their Star Wars that could be read as silly, because I think that they take it very seriously and they don't want to be, I mean, I don't want to say self-conscious, but like they take it seriously, and they want other people to take it seriously. So whenever they see something that could be read as like silly or like maybe something for kids, I think it's sort of they get really worked up about it. I say they as if I'm not a Star Wars fan, but I think we know what I'm talking about. It's like John.
To your point, I think we were having a conversation last night. Josh and I were talking on the phone, and one thing that came up that I think would be a good future podcast is the idea of what is Star Wars? Like what do we define Star Wars as? And I think that kind of goes with what you're talking about with like the balancing act. Like we were talking about, let's say, The Last Jedi. A lot of people were upset with Luke Skywalker, but we feel that it's within the wheelhouse of Luke to have some sort of tragedy, as compared to like if you go to Luke Skywalker now and he's like, oh, I'm a professional clown and a pedophile. You're like, that's not Luke Skywalker. What the fuck? Like, so there's a balancing act,
Yeah.
And then, but on your point as to like people taking Star Wars seriously, I think this goes to another conversation we've had in the past, which maybe we can get into with The Empire Strikes Back. But The Empire Strikes Back set the gold standard of Star Wars. And I think one of the main reasons why was because it took itself seriously, with some silliness in it, but like because it took itself the most seriously and it was like the highest quality, I think subconsciously people are reaching for that for every Star Wars that they're fed now. So now they're like, take yourself seriously. Maybe we could have another Empire Strikes Back quality thing. And so like, I think it's a subconscious thing. When they see something silly, they're like, oh, they're not trying as hard. It's not going to be as good. And then they kind of internally freak out.
No, for sure. We've talked about this a lot, but I think, and it's funny because there's a Star Wars account that I follow on Instagram, Star Wars 1980, and this person, they posted a screenshot, a comparison of the roster of bounty hunters from The Empire Strikes Back with IG-88 and Bosk and Forlom, and then on the bottom was the Vespa biker gang, and they were like, what we wanted and what we got, right? And I was kind of like, yeah, okay, well, see, the thing is, once again, and this is a topic for a future podcast, I think comparing everything to The Empire Strikes Back is not great, because for a lot of reasons, I think The Empire Strikes Back, while when all is said and done, is my favorite Star Wars film, but I do think it's an anomaly that created false expectations for what Star Wars is. It showed us what it could do, but as we've seen, that's not really what George Lucas had in mind in terms of the tone.
Yeah, I agree.
So this is because me and John have talked about this before, and it's like kind of a hot take, and I'm not trying to like push any buttons, but like, because I love Star Wars, I'm a big Star Wars fan, but like we tend to think of like, oh, this is like like it's almost like the Beatles, right? Like everything is just a great hit. But like there's so many more movies and content that are not as good as the original. So it's like, I don't know. It's like, maybe it's not as high quality. Like there's, say for just the movies, it's like 3 out of 9 of them are like really, really good. So it's still like the lower like minority of things that's good. So it's like less the Beatles and more like, like Foo Fighters or something. No offense to Foo Fighter fans, but you know what I'm saying? Like where it's just like, it's not like everything's pure gold and has always been gold. And now all of a sudden this new stuff, like I have the same thing with The Simpsons. You're like, Simpsons has been like worse, like 5 times longer than it's been great. So it's just like, but it has like this expectation that like is where the best work that it did is kind of like what they're saying is like, the
it's
bulk
like, it all
of
should
there.
be.
Yeah, it's like the legacy curse, whether it's a legacy band or a legacy movie series. It's like you have a quality that you're just shooting for every single time, and like it's just statistics, it's math. Like you're not going to hit it every single time, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they shouldn't shoot for those things, or it's like, or it's all shit. Like there's good quality stuff, even in this episode, which I would like to get into. But there's some good moments in this episode.
Mm-hmm.
No, absolutely.
Sure.
I would like to get into that as well. Mickey, did you have something to say?
I guess I just wanted to kind of point out, like we were kind of talking about, like how the silliness of it, the fact that it's like kind of a kid's thing, and then I just kind of had to note that it is part of Disney Plus, and that seems to be where Disney Plus is, kind of going with the content. Like when you go on that platform, you kind of get it's weird because it's not like Nick Kids, it's not like things for like 3 to 5 year olds, but I feel like it sense when you like scroll that platform, you're like, oh, okay, this is for like 8 to 15-year-olds or something, and that's I feel like where like this could fit in.
Yeah, I don't know how much that Disney branding is really affecting the content of the show. Like, I really do think, well, I know for a fact that Disney Plus is trying to broaden who their perceived audience is, because like they don't want to just be known as the stuff for kids and family. With the Marvel shows, for example, like I think Marvel is able to retain its own identity. And I think that with the purchase of Lucasfilm, I think that their intention was for Lucasfilm and its properties like Star Wars to still retain their identity and be what they are. So I don't know that is necessarily fitting it into something that it wouldn't have already tried to be. I mean, just look at the pre-Disney output, the cartoons like the Clone Wars and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Which I'm not super familiar with, but from what I have seen, like it does kind of run the gamut from super silly to very poignant and serious. Murray.
So I think almost like maybe more subconsciously than people realize, they almost are expecting it to have like Harry Potter, like the book where like it aged up with the core audience, whereas Star Wars never, like Star Wars just they like, no, this is our core audience. I don't care how old you're getting. Like this is and that first hit me. That's a
great point. That's a great point.
Because that first hit me when after The Last Jedi, which I know my dislike of anything of it is solely because I'm a victim of a horrible screening of it. My first time seeing it, and I can't separate it. So I was saying like how I didn't like it, and my friend Bill was like, "Oh, I thought it was amazing," and I was like, "Oh, really? What about this, this, and this?" And then he wasn't mad, but he finally said like, out of everyone here talking about it, I went with my son, so I'm the only one that saw it with a 9-year-old, and trust me, it's awesome. Like, and you're just like, that's very okay. Yeah,
that's
have all the points in the world right there.
Yeah,
John.
To your point, the second time I think I saw the movie, there was like a 6 or 7-year-old girl immediately to my right, and the scene in The Last Jedi when they kill Snoke. And Rey and Ren look at each other and they go back to back and it goes into slow motion as the bad guys are coming in on them right before they fight. The little girl literally like leapt out of her seat, grabbed the railing in front of her and went, ooh, 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 ooh. And like, and that made the movie 5 stars better. Her. And I was like, yeah, this moment fucking rocks. This movie's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I was like that too, as as
an adult, I felt that way too.
Yeah, like when I was like 35 or something like that.
The little kid made it just better.
Yeah, 100%. And then it like it's eye opening. Like, oh, okay, no, that's their audience. It's nailing it for the audience. And for me, if I meet someone that like loves the prequels, and I'm like, oh, and they might like the original, but they love the prequels enough in the conversation, you find out like they were like 10 years old when, or like 7 years old when episode 1 came out. Whereas we were like seniors in high school or something like that. And you're like, okay, yeah, no, it's going to hit a lot different for you than it is for us.
I remember, I remember, I think possibly the first time I ever watched Star Wars I was maybe like at most 4 years old. And my dad hooked up the speakers to our TV and he put the tape.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember like, as soon as it started with the galaxy far, far away, I can't read, but I could tell like something's going on. And then when it just says like Star Wars, my jaw opened up. And for the rest of the movie, I was just staring slack-jawed at the TV, completely in the zone. Like, what the fuck is this? It blew me off the map, and
that's awesome.
That's cool.
Cool.
And like as a little kid, like it hit all the buttons. And I feel like even with the ones that were like, Attack of the Clones isn't really that great, but for some 5-year-old out there that saw Attack of the Clones, that could be the first Star Wars movie, man. That's probably
Yeah.
his favorite movie of all time, or
Of all
her
time,
favorite
yeah,
movie
'cause
of all time. You know,
I was young enough that I thought that 20th Century Fox with the spotlights and that
Yeah.
every movie that started like that was Star Wars.
Was
like
Star
that-
Wars.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
like that's
Uh-huh.
what like I couldn't associate. So like yeah, we all watched it when we were super young, and that's why we love it so much. But I think I'm not patting ourselves on the back at all, but I think once you realize that it doesn't age up with its original audience and that it just stays the same, then it like almost like frees you, like disconnects you
Yeah.
from the Matrix, and you're just like, oh no, this is awesome for
I
like
think you're right about that. It frees
Sure.
you.
No, I think that's a really great point that hadn't occurred to me. But like I said, Harry Potter that aged up with its audience, and Star Wars stays for 12-year-olds or 9-year-olds or whatever it is. I want to pivot to some of the stuff that I thought really was great in this episode.
Yeah.
I don't know how you guys feel about it, but in the flashback when he discovers that the I guess the biker gang massacred the Tuscan tribe that he was a part of, like that really hit me between the eyes. Like
Yeah, me too.
especially coming off of how much we kind of celebrated them last week. That really hit. Like that really landed with me.
yeah.
I thought that was the best part of the episode for a couple of reasons. One, the reveal of it I thought was perfect because Boba Fett is talking to the leader of the Pike Syndicate or whatever they're called. And he's like, well, we already have the deal with the bikers. And then Boba Fett's like, all right, you're never going to hear from them ever again. I'm going to handle it right now. And kind of like in The Mandalorian, where it's almost like an RPG, where it's like a go and fetch it sort of quest, where it's like, I'll do this for you, but you got to do this quest for me. So I was like, okay, like Boba's going to go to the biker gang and like mess them up again. But then it's like a bait and switch where it's like, nope, this is more of a reveal that the Tuscans were taken out. And that hit really hard. And I think the hardest moment is when he's burning the bodies and he takes out the little stick. And you're like, oh, God, the kid's body must be in there. He's dead. That's so fucking terrible. But on the flip side, they purposefully never show the woman warrior's body. You see the chief and you see the stick for the kid, but you never see that badass warrior lying dead either. And
that's interesting.
And I think she's going to pop up in this later on and become part of his gang or whatever, and like just have real retribution against the Pike Syndicate.
That's interesting. I didn't notice that, but that's a good point.
If that's true, I just got so excited that
Me
like
too.
she might be back. Yeah, like I like legit got so excited. Yeah, but like I was like so bummed out, and then like of course like you can't help but make ties to A New Hope and the reveal there with the same thing, but the what kind of like I was glad like after how like attached you get in the second episode that like you only see the aftermath. I know it's Disney, so it's not like they're gonna show it, like, but if we had to watch like an episode 3-esque thing of this like war or people getting like killed, I would be like very, very bummed out. And so it's like I was a little like relieved in that sense, but also it makes sense because like we were talking last week, like something has to push Boba Fett to be kind of what we saw him to be when he popped up in Mandalorian, which was like the like just like more of that anger, and like you're like, oh, this is a guy that would disintegrate everybody. Like, and so if you have that reignite his rage or whatever he was like kind of quelled by being friends with them and like learning from them and them saving him, like you could see like, oh, okay, they like broke this man and now they're in a lot of trouble.
No, totally.
I definitely, I noticed that the woman's warrior wasn't there. So I was like, and I didn't put two together with the stick. So I was like, oh, hopefully she's got the younglings and the dogs. Cause I was also really sad. Like, I'm assuming all those dog things are dead too, which bummed me out. So, but I was like thinking like, oh, maybe her and the kids and the dog things are like hiding in a cave somewhere or something. Fingers crossed.
With a nice white picket fence.
Yeah,
there we go. Yeah.
The other thing that I really dug was the stuff with the badass Wookiee whose name I can't pronounce, but
Black Cranston or something like
that.
Yeah,
there's a way to pronounce it. I don't know, but Kieran Gillen, who created the character, who wrote the Darth Vader comics and the Dr. Aphra stuff, I think, he popped up on Twitter when he showed up in live action, and he was like, my temporary name for the character when I was writing it was Nubaka. So So I think I'm going to refer to him as New Baka until I hear someone actually pronounce it properly. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that jump scare where he wakes up in the Bacta tank and he rips him out of the Bacta tank, I think maybe comes right on the heels of that flashback we were just talking about. Am I wrong?
I think it does.
Yeah.
I think it
Yeah,
does.
yeah.
It was like
that-
very jarring and awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, exactly. Like that whole jump scare and like seeing that Wookiee fucking grab him when he's so vulnerable. Like literally, he has no clothes on.
It was like Psycho, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like that Eastern Promises fight. I mean, not.
Yeah.
I mean, not as
Swinging
good,
dick,
obviously,
yeah,
but
yeah.
it's sort.
Yeah.
But it's sort of like
We
no,
need
yeah,
more
like
Boba
I
Dick
thought.
in this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that scene was awesome because that Wookiee character I think is the scariest fucking thing ever, and I love him. Like when he showed up and he so violently throws him out of the tank and they get into the fight, I was like, yeah. And Boba Fett, like he doesn't have his armor; he's just wearing speedos. You know, he's covered in like petroleum jelly, and he's got like get this done. But my only critique of that fight is the moves and the choreography, the biting and everything was so visceral, and he's getting punched to shit by this 10-foot Wookiee. And it's not even like a bruise or a trickle of blood from his nose or a bite mark.
true.
And I was like, I wonder if that's struggling with the dynamic of like, this is a kid's show, so we can't show too much blood. But that's a minor point. I actually thought the scene itself was cool. And I thought that the Wookiee taking on the entire gang by himself and almost winning was a really cool show of force to be like, you know, these guys might be badass bounty hunters and stuff like that, but they still have their work cut out for them. And I just thought that was awesome and kind of terrifying at the same time.
Yeah. Mickey.
Yeah, I just like I kind of like you said the whole thing with the Eastern Promise, but not as good. And that's where I was like, it was awesome, it was great. I wasn't thinking Eastern Promise. I was thinking the bathroom fight in that Mission Impossible movie. You know, that one where it's like the physicality. Because this is like you had just like two dudes who could just like you look at them and you're like, this is going to be bad. Like there's a lot of you know, like power can happen. And like, it just was like almost there. But I think my is like all the rooms seemed pretty open. Like they were almost like all wrestling rings they could wrestle in, where I almost like wish there was more like objects they could get smashed through or something.
Obstacles,
that was like the one thing where it's like almost
the
you can see
Mission
the physicality
Impossible
of
scene
this.
has that.
Exactly. Well, that's exactly and what I was like kind of thinking where oh man, well I'm blanking on the actor's name now, the Witcher guy, where he's just like that part where he does
Henry
like
Cavill.
yeah, when he does like his like arm like gets him ready, and you're just like, oh no,
Yeah.
oh no.
Yeah.
I was waiting for that moment, and I felt like it never quite hit.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I will say about the openness of the room, like it really lets you see very clearly how far he can throw Boba Fett from one side to the other.
This is like a minor thing. It's not even a critique, but it was something that kind of like made me laugh because, like, for what we know of Boba Fett before he has the training from the Raiders, and then we have that on top of it, you know what kind of like adversary he's going to be, and then you have this big Nubaka guy that's like just terrifying, and he's got the upper hand, and then like the like little like biker kids are like, I'll save you, like, and it just like reminded me of was it Endgame when you see Captain Marvel just like single-handedly destroy like a ship, and then everybody's like, oh, we'll get her back because she needs our help. It's like, clearly she doesn't, like she could like fend for herself. And so I just like, I understand, of course, your mob boss is under attack, so you're gonna like help him out, but it's just like they were so not set up to be any sort of that I thought that like, oh, they're gonna come save him. I almost thought it was kind of like silly because like, what are they gonna do? Are they just gonna sit like and drink tea and listen to like the Austin Powers soundtrack? Like, what are they gonna do in this fight?
Two thoughts about that. One, I thought that scene better illustrated the function of their cybernetics than the chase scene did. So I thought that like you see them like with their electric chains and stuff like that. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. But two, when you really think about Boba Fett in the original trilogy, he wasn't much of a fighter. He was more of he would outwit you. Like he would set up traps for you. Like he didn't catch Han Solo because he beat him up. He caught Han Solo because he just tracked him to Bespin. That's where they knew where he was. And likewise in Return of the Jedi, when he famously goes out like a chump, he goes out like a chump, you know, like
true,
like he tries to tie up Luke with rope and Luke cuts his gun in half and his jetpack accidentally goes up. Like, it's not like he's like Bruce Lee. So I think it kind of fits with like he's a better fighter in the show now than he ever was, in my opinion. Just given like what we've seen from the films. I mean, I don't know about the cartoons and stuff like that. But still, I thought it worked.
Before I got a chance to see the episode, I had designs on. I was going to stay up because, you know, here on the West Coast, the episodes drop at midnight instead of 3 a.m. So it's like a very doable thing. But I have a 1-year-old, so I was like, no, man, I'm going to do it. I'm going to stay up. And then it's like, you know, 9:55, and I'm like, I'm not doing this. So I watched it the following day, and I try to avoid spoilers. I even tried to avoid like not like full on spoilers, but just like the reaction, because I know that it'll color my expectations for when I sit down to watch it. And a friend of mine who didn't realize that I hadn't seen it yet, he texted me, Robert Rodriguez should fire himself. And I was like,
Jesus.
And I was like, oh, okay, I guess people didn't like this one.
I mean, that's a bit harsh.
Yeah, it's tricky because it's not bad. I just like, there's something that with Robert Rodriguez, like, I don't want it to seem like, oh, he's a hack, but there's just something in him that changed from, and like we were saying, like, Desperados not like a great movie, but there was a change from the person who made that to the person that made like Spy Kids. I'm not talking about in terms of a kids movie. It's just like, there was
style and approach.
And then to the extent that I think that he needs some sort of constraint, because when he's thrown into the flashback seems like it's directed by somebody else, because it doesn't seem as like hokey and flat. I keep saying that. I don't know how else to describe it, but like, it seems like it's just like better quality all throughout, that it's like that it, that I feel like when he's involved with like the city life and all these other characters, he kind of, I don't want to say like fumbles it, because he's a far better director than I ever could be. So I can't like say anything bad about him, but there is just something where I was just like, oh, this just seems like hokey, to the extent that the flashback seemed like it was done by someone else. Like maybe that did episode 2, you know, of the show, not the movie.
Yeah. John.
Yeah, I think that goes back to what we were saying before, or at least what, I think I brought up before, which is I think there's a hokiness to Robert Rodriguez. I think everything, like, you know, Shark Boy and Lava Girl, like, if that's not hokey, what is? And like, but that's what he likes, man. And it's just like, and there's a charm to that. Like I feel like a lot of different directors come in and they fit with the Star Wars aesthetic, and they do different things. Like, all right, this one's going to be a little bit more samurai oriented. This one's going to be a little bit more Flash Gordon. And I feel like he's of the dude of those action movies where like Arnold will just go into a field with a fucking M60 and blow away people without taking any cover at all, with infinite ammunition.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's Robert Rodriguez. Like, he's just like, he's like of that vein. So when things come off as sort of like, I don't know, that, I guess, or like, or flat or whatever, I'm like, I think that's just kind of harking back to that old, like, late 80s sort of like just people shooting from the hip. And like, even the original Star Wars is kind of like that. Like, Luke is like out in the open blowing away stormtroopers and like, oh fuck, we can't hit them. You know?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
So it's, like, it's a little, it's like kind of like inherent to the source a little bit, you know?
Yeah. Now I want to see Shane Black do a Star Wars TV show.
Oh man,
yeah, dude. Yeah, someone should give him a call. That would be fucking awesome. He should do a movie. They should bring him in to do a movie, I think.
People would hate it. It would be like, it's like when I say Iron Man 3 is my favorite, like one of my favorite Marvel movies. It's like up there. Everyone thinks I'm like completely out of my mind. I'm like, it's an Iron Man movie in which like he doesn't have the suit, which everyone's complaining about. It's like, no, but we always see him in the suit and what he could do. This is like totally new. And I'll go on about Shane Black. So quick, move on. Otherwise,
I was going to say, you're talking about writing and a good movie writer, you know, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang and all that stuff, and Lethal Weapon. And I was thinking about the writing of this, because I was thinking about how they set up in the last episode, like, hey, check out these 2 new huts in this Wookiee. Like, these are going to be like, your adversary for the season, and the next episode it's like goodbye.
We're leaving, and
that
you
was
should
kind of
too.
like quick. Like I thought, like they were going to be around for a couple episodes.
Well, so about that. So I think this is a good segue to talk about what we think at this point in the season, where we think it might be going. I have to think that that's kind of a ruse that the Hutts are gonna come back. Like they're lulling him into a false sense of security and being like, nope, like we're done, we're out of here. So we have 4 episodes left. I still don't really know, and I don't mean this in a bad way, I don't really know where this is going. I'm still intrigued. And I think something that I think people online, especially fandom, has a hard time with, I feel like people lose sight of the fact that this is one chapter of a 7-part story. And so when they say, oh, that episode sucked, this whole show sucks, it's like, well, you don't know how it fits into the larger whole yet, right? So especially with the hot take Twitter culture that we live in, is like everyone feels compelled to have like a really strong opinion. And when there's anything that can be sort of read in a negative way, there's like a lack of nuance. It's like, oh, I can jump all over that.
That reminds me of our first episode where you're like, was someone wrote the Book of Boba Fett is worse than polio, and it's just like, come on,
right.
You know? But that being said, though, I think we live in a pop culture setting now where a lot of the things that we are being shown are things that we have to figure out, and part of the joy is figuring it out. And, maybe it all started with Lost, or Twin Peaks, even going further back. But it's just like, we live in a culture where it's like you're trying to figure out the season and you're trying to guess where it's going to go. I think Tyrion Lannister is going to do this in Game of Thrones, and I think this is going to happen. And like, who's going to rule the throne, or who killed Laura Palmer, and then Nick, what's his name? True Detective Nick Pizzolatto or something like that. I think he said something like, we were all kind of fed like a steady diet of like bad writing for TV. So when True Detective came out and everyone was like figuring out like what was going to happen, how is this going to go? Like, is it some crazy conspiracy, whatever? In the first episode, Woody Harrelson's character says something along the lines to Matthew McConaughey, the other detective. He's like, you ever believe in the theory that the answer is like the most obvious one? The one that's like right under your nose, and the writer of the show was kind of trying to tell the audience, like, stop it, like stop trying to like just enjoy the ride. Maybe I'm projecting onto him a little bit, but I feel like that is where some of these people are coming from when they watch these episodes and like, this episode sucks, so therefore the whole show sucks, and I don't know where it's going to go. And like you said, Josh, like, not knowing where it's going to go is not a bad thing. I think not knowing where it's going to go is a good thing in many different ways, because you're always going to be surprised, So,
no, totally.
Yeah, I just think it's a bit of a culture clash is what it is.
Star Wars, I think, kind of like flip-flops on this itself. I don't know what the reviews were for Empire Strikes Back, but like that ended with like zero resolution, right? It just like kind of sets you up like with like they basically lost, and they're needing to kind of regroup and figure it out. And I wonder if that like came out today, people like, there's no ending to it. Like, what the fuck? Like when we watched Lord of the Rings, John, in theaters, and people like, well, that's it. Like, this is how it's ending.
They said, what about the ring?
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's just, and I mean, I get that with like, say like, No Country for Old Men. Like, if something's not concluded, like wrapped up and presented to somebody, then they're like, oh, I don't know, it sucked. But then if it is presented to them, they're like, oh, it was too easy. And I think, like, so episode 1 of the prequels ends like clean cut. And I feel like they all end clean cut. And so now, even when it goes to TV shows, if the TV episode is not wrapped up almost like a standalone episode, people are like, that fucking sucked. Like, that's the dumbest thing. It's like, well, it's part of like a series. Like, give it a chance. Like, yeah, I don't know. It's just they're expecting it to be all clean and wrapped up in standalone episodes, almost like a cartoon would be.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think I'm going to take it one further. I think they're expecting like a cliffhanger that lets them know exactly what's going to happen in the next episode. Like they want to know where this is going. I think that they want every episode to be like a huge event and end on like a crazy cliffhanger, so they know exactly what to expect next week. And it's weird because again, like I don't think fans know exactly what they want. They know what they do not want, but I don't think they know what they want. John.
There was always that old adage that audiences are smarter than studios think they are, which is true. But I think, ironically, since audiences are smarter and they're trying to figure out the mysteries, like I was saying before, they also need to be led by the hand to show them where the trail is. So without a cliffhanger being like, this is going to be the next thing, what's going to happen, people can like concentrate on that target and be like, and try to figure out that mystery. But if they're not given that cliffhanger, or if they're not given that resolution, it's completely open-ended. And so when they have all the options of what's possible, I feel like they get paralysis. And then they're like, well, what's going to happen? And then they take that as almost like I don't know what.
As like a failure, or like a failing on the,
Yeah, as a failing in the show, as compared to just being like, well, I mean, you'll just wait and see. You know?
Right.
When you're saying how there's like, it's so open-ended, or like too many possible options that it's like debilitating, that's so true, because on a non-Star Wars related thing, like if I'm playing a video game like a Metroidvania or something like that, and I'm playing Symphony of the Night and I go into a place and I can't progress any further, I'm like relieved. I'm like, okay, like I know out of all these like passageways, like it's like focusing me to where I have to go. Cause it's like my favorite thing in a video game is a locked door, because I'm like, okay, I have to figure out how to unlock that. But I also am like, it takes away one of the many options of directions I could go. So like, I feel that when you said that, I was like, oh, that makes 100% sense with TV shows and even multiple part movies, where if it's too open-ended, it almost gets like overwhelming, where you would think it would be the other way around. Like if your hand is held too much, you're like, oh, that's like boring, and I know where it's going to go, but there's like maybe a comfort in that.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. I think it's a taste thing. I think it's a Mickey, you were talking a lot about this whole notion of peak TV that we're in, and like how we're trained to watch TV now, and and I do think that's kind of inseparable from the immediate hot take social media culture. I think they kind of feed each other, right? People need something to talk about. They want something to talk about, and the way a lot of serialized most shows in quote unquote the peak TV genre, if you want to call it that, because I do think it's like a genre now. Like there are shows that are trying specifically to be peak TV.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, they play into that. Like it's almost like they're written for what we once upon a time would have called like the water cooler discussion, but now it's like the whole point. I mean, we're writing this for the audience to be talking about it on Twitter and to be finding, like, to be, kind of guessing and stuff like that.
Yeah, we have to give them something to talk about.
So they're expecting that. Yeah. Like, okay, when this comes, I'm going to be on there, and
I feel like Jon Favreau and the Book of Boba Fett is like this. Like, I think he's doing his own thing, and he's kind of like, very smartly, especially with something like Star Wars and like the character of Boba Fett in particular, when there are so many strong feelings and so many high expectations. That the only way to like do a story with any integrity is to just kind of, as much as possible, set all that aside and tune it out and decide for yourself what it's going to be, and just kind of, kind of keep your head down and just plow through and do it. And I'm very much getting that sense. This show is working on its own wavelength, and some fans are either they're tuning into it, or they're just like, no, this is not what I thought or what I wanted. Right.
It's funny because when we think about the beginning of peak TV, most people will say like The Sopranos, Mad Men, and with both of those shows weren't about figuring out the next step. Like those shows were like a day in the day of like, here's a day of Tony Soprano, and it didn't leave on a cliffhanger of like, what's going to happen next week? It's almost just like, and no one really talked about those shows. But then, at the same time, you have shows like Lost that were coming about, and then Game of Thrones comes about, and Game of Thrones is all about that.
Breaking
So
Bad.
people would start talking about Don Draper, like from Mad Men, like, oh, who is he? What's he going to do? And it's like, the show was never about that. The show was just a day-to-day sort of thing. But all of that said, I want to hear what Mickey has to say next, but I'll leave a question to you guys just to play the game. Where do you think the Book of Boba Fett is going to go? You know?
Yeah, I mean, I was just gonna say, like, I definitely feel like, for me, like, when we talk like the era of peak TV, I actually think, like, you know, you have this, like, Sopranos is like the era of, that's like prestige TV, and that was a separate thing, and then you got into like 2010, and then you got peak, and like Mad Men's almost the overlap between
I see what
the
you're saying.
two. Where I almost kind of feels funny because I feel bad for Mad Men, because it was like, it actually belonged 10 years earlier, and it wasn't belonged on Twitter, but it got sucked into like people talking about it, and like. And now I feel like, the Book of Boba Fett's squarely in this peak TV and how we are expected to interact. And it's a good question. Like, it's weird because I don't know. Like, I like watching these Boba Fett. Like, they almost do feel like there is kind of almost this distinctness between each episode. And it doesn't feel like it's pushing me forward to any sort of like, there's no mystery, there's no mythology, like of that kind of like Lost style, which is kind of free and kind of nice in one way. I almost get like the feeling I was getting from, because it's a Western too, is like, I almost wonder if like this Boba Fett and like it's kind of almost fitting in with like these old school, like that Wild Wild West show or something, where it's not, I mean, there is an ongoing story, but at the same time, it's like, doesn't feel so like sucked into any sort of like greater mythology.
Speaking of Wild Wild West, not revisited, but I dipped my toe into that show for the first time recently. I really dig that show a lot, and it bums me out that at least people of our generation, we hear Wild Wild West, we think of the Will Smith movie. Though the single from that movie is pretty catchy. Anyway, closing thoughts.
I don't know exactly where it's going to head, but I feel like Boba Fett is going to get Nubaka, because he was like just hurled away by the Hutts, and then he was like, no, go be free. And I think he's going to have loyalty. I think he's going to have the badass raider. And I think in Westerns, I don't know if anyone's seen the Western Joe Kidd, right? Written by Elmore Leonard. And in it, as a weapon of sorts, Clint Eastwood uses a train and like drives it through a building. And I feel like that moment's going to come with Boba Fett on a Rancor. Like, whatever this war that's going to happen, this gang war, that's going to be like the big thing. And I wish, if that is the case, that it was spread out for like longer than, I don't know, what was it, 25 seconds, when he's like, oh, some people ride them, and then Boba Fett's like, I want to ride it. You're like, all right, well, you could have maybe spread that out a little bit. But that's where I think I was sort of thinking like a Yojimbo thing at first, because like the Man with No Name trilogy, where he's going to play both sides against each other. But I feel like now with the death of the Raiders, it's going to be much different, and he's going to get his own type of army rather than like out with them, have them fight each other. And then he's going to come in riding a Rancor like a train through a building.
I think, I don't think I can do any better than that. I think that sounds pretty awesome to me.
I'll take it.
Any other thoughts, Mickey? Any thoughts?
Yeah, like I said, my last statement, where I'm kind of like, I don't know if the loss is the right word, but I'm just kind of like, I really don't know. I'm actually feel like I'm pretty good at predicting, like, oh yeah, this is where they want to go with this, and I'm not getting that. So I'm very curious. Like I said, it was so far it was like a down for me this episode. So I'm interested to see where the next episode goes and how it changes things up.
Yeah, and again, like, I don't think that not knowing where it's going to go is a bad thing. Like, I'm actually kind of like, I'm interested in tuning in because I'm curious. I want to see where this is going to go. I really don't know, which I think is kind of cool for a change.
I was thinking about where the show might be headed, and like, and it was funny because like, I think when the show started, I was like, oh, this might be some sort of backdoor thing to bring in the Crimson Dawn organization, whatever. And maybe they'll still do that, but it doesn't quite seem like they're advertising that as much. But thinking back on this episode in particular and where the show could be going, in a weird way, it's almost like a Star Wars Cowboy Bebop. Like, they're like accumulating all these like very different people to join their crew. And they're going up against like these like underground triads or syndicates. And you have all these flashbacks to past trauma, kind of like Spike and Cowboy Bebop. And it's like,
Oh, true.
Like
That's a good
like,
point.
and it's like, I wonder if it's going to culminate kind of like what Murray was saying, where it's like, it's going to be this big sort of thing where it's like he's going to go against the head of the Pike Syndicate. He's going to come in as Rancor. There's going to be the woman warrior from the Tuscans, if she's still alive, like, and it's just like all these like moments of like revenge and also the comedy of like very, very, very different people working together. Which, by the way, we didn't get into in this episode, which I wish we kind of did. But Fennec, 3 episodes in, I'm not sure she's really doing much besides just kind of hanging around. So I'm really curious to see what happens with her as an arc from here on out, because she's very interesting and she's a very good actor.
They made a big point, and I don't know if I was just like hyper focused on it, but multiple times they made a big point to show that she has a knife in the butt of her rifle. Mm-hmm. Like, it came up multiple times as a thing. So I'm wondering if that's going to come into play. Like, because even like it was something she used it to stab Nubaka, right? And then they showed the same shot of her taking it out again to like hot wire the door or whatever. Like to the point that I was like, why do they keep showing this, like that she has this tool? So I don't know. Maybe
she'll literally stab him in the back or something.
Yeah, that's not a character thing like you're saying, but that is just something that is. I was noticing. I was like, what are they like? Why are they focusing on this?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah. No, John, like you said, I think it's still possible that we'll get some kind of a Crimson Dawn Kira reveal. I think the thing with the Hutts leaving again, I think is a red herring. I think they're going to let them hash it out and swoop in later and deal with who's left.
They're pulling the Yojimbo, not Boba Fett.
Yeah, right. Yes, right.
I actually thought about that when it was occurring. I was like, oh, they're doing the Yojimbo thing, but not Boba Fett. It's the bad guys doing
it.
Yeah. And what you're saying about like him getting this crew together, this motley crew of disparate characters or whatever, it's kind of like what he was talking about doing in the flashback about uniting all the Tusken tribes, right? He's not uniting, the crime families. He's uniting the denizens of Tatooine.
He's more like Robin Hood.
Kind of a little.
Or Bug's Life, guys. Ants together are stronger than the grasshoppers.
And on that note, I think that's a good place. I think that's a good place to close. I want to thank John, Mickey, and Murray. And like we all said, I think we're all looking forward to seeing episode 4. And I look forward to discussing it with you all. Have a good one.